Shiruim and Brocha. We're going to go to the next chapter of the Tzav Vziruz, aptly titled Swimming Against Public Opinion. We're living in a world that seems driven by public opinion. And with all the social media that grasp, I'm just earlier I was speaking to a doctor, and I said, you should know that all these social media, these apps, are created to be addictive. It's in the algorithm. And this addictiveness sucks you in and gets you involved. And so here the Rebbe says they didn't have social media in those days. They had other things going on. E07 works in each generation on his own level. So he says here like this. I'm speaking, obviously, this is the translation. As a torrent river surges forth, sweeping with it all that lies in its path, penetrating into deep recesses and washing away all the buried things. So does the torrent of public opinion sweep along the individual's mind. You may not know it. You may even deny it. But you have been brainwashed by common belief, carried along, perhaps more, perhaps less. You now think along these twisted paths. No? There you go. Now, we've been actually recently, whole mindsets have changed. The whole world has been locked up for months with this, with the corona problem, and in this is like a greenhouse where people were stuck and with so they sit on their phones or whatever, and they hear things that are excitable and oh yeah, and all of a sudden riots in the streets over things that I don't want to go into the nitty gritty of rights or wrongs but the public opinion drives and changes even the understanding of who we are and where we come from. So the Rebbe says this is what public opinion does, and most people are just too lazy or just frightened and just go along with the flow. So the Rebbe goes further and says, so stay away from the middle of the river. In other words, this torrent of river, this what grabs you and schleps you away from what's true. Stay away from there. Don't be concerned about what other people are going to say. Right? But now he says a provider. This alone won't protect you entirely, because you cannot completely seclude yourself. You could sit and say, well, but in my house, in my stiebel, but public opinion, the gas, was meret, you used to call it mikveh raid, what they talk about over a coffee. You don't know who is coming and where this stuff is coming from. There are people with agendas, and they all of a sudden things come up and you get caught up with this. You can't seclude yourself. You could try, but you can't. You can't put the genie back into the bottle. The internet and all these things are here. And so we need filters. We need to protect ourselves. But still, it's a problem. So the Rebbe says you can't seclude yourself. Who can vouch for your wife or your children if they're not going to be swept along with the flow? Now, I tell you, this is written in the 1920s, beginning of the 1930s, in Poland, in the seat of Hasidus. The Enlightenment, the anti-Torah atmosphere, the place was burning with that. The fire, newspapers and novels and just plain gossips in the streets. People were turning away from Yiddishkeit in droves. We talk about the good old days. There were no good old days. My Shvezchan told me that in Varsha, there wasn't a house that didn't have never at least one or two of the children or the wife or the husband leaving the derech entirely, just walking away from it all. Shuls were closing. They were opening theaters specifically for those Jews who were going off the derech, to drive them further away. Right? And this is the milieu that the Rebbe was writing his book about. He says, yeah, you can't leave. This stuff is creeping in. Shver told me about mishpacha that were totally just had thrown away the whole of their Yiddishkeit. And there was one particular sweet lady, I knew her, she was a survivor, but a very fine woman, but she left Yiddishkeit. She said, but my father wanted me to put on a sheitel when I got married. She said, she left. She said, I wasn't even ready to keep Shabbos anymore. But to have my father come to my chasna, I put on a sheitel and I pretended to keep Shabbos. And 2 days after the chasna, I threw the sheitel away. That's what happened. That's what was going on. It's just not an isolated incident. I've heard this from many people, who lived through that period of time. So he said, you can't vouch for anybody, because some of our gedolim that we knew, of Yanka Kamenetsky and others, had family that were going off the derech, and they left home because of it. So we don't have any idea this flow, this public opinion. Yeah, they will then be even these members of the family who get touched, even though you're trying to keep yourself secluded, they will open up the floodgates and bring the flood waters inside your doors. You're going to sit down at a Shabbos table, and all of a sudden someone's going to bring up something, and where'd you get that from? And it starts, what are you going to say? Because you don't know where it came from. And who can abstain from breathing the air that carries the germ of public opinion? Thoughts and opinions are beyond time and space, says the Rebbe, and they flow from mind to mind in quantum leaps. Sometimes I'm astounded at the wisdom of this tzaddik. You see what's happening? He said, these things, they're ethereal. Because it's ethereal. It just comes and it flies back and forth, and all of a sudden, where did you get that from? Oh yeah, Tati, it's true. Well, what do you know? Oh, so what do we do with all this? How do we, especially in our day and age, where so much information is coming from all sides, and so much is driven, the so-called leadership of the non-Jewish world, who we're in Golos, we lived, the presidents and prime ministers, they themselves are driven by and part of the Twitter and all this other stuff that just, personally I've taken and filtered out that no one could use Twitter on any of the machshavim I have, because it's just such an evil source sometimes. Yes, I'll be told, oh, it's not so bad, but you don't have any idea. There's no way of stopping from one subject to fly over to something else. And it's not censored. And I don't know if that's not the point. The point is, are we meant to hear all this stuff? Is that what a Torah Jew is supposed to be doing? How are we supposed to be focused on our connection with the Irish when we're swamped with it so much? So the Rebbe says, You can't remain static in this torrent river just by standing firm in your place. You must actively, here's the Rebbe's pu'ula, his idea of how to stop this, you must actively swim against the flow. You may not be successful in swimming upstream, but at least you will not be swept down by the flow further. So what the Rebbe is saying here is you have to do something to go against it. Standing up on a soapbox is not what the Rebbe means. That's not going to help you. We're talking about the inner fight within oneself. You must do some pu'ula, something that's going to keep you, that it's going to allow you to swim against what everyone tells you, what the public opinion is leading us to say. So he says, it is with spiritual life and the purities of our spirit that you have attained. So it has to be. You cannot retain them against the flow unless you continue to struggle for spiritual growth. We are here for a purpose. The purpose is to grow in our connection with Kaviyuchel with the Eibishter. When the public opinion, when all the ruckus, with all the noises schlepping us away from that, we're living in a godless world today. Right? We're this little small world of Bnei Yisrael against the whole entirety. So it's not enough just to say, we do it this way. No, that's not good enough. You have to struggle to grow against this. With all the forces against us, you must struggle just the opposite direction to grow. And how do I do that? You must swim upstream without respite, upwards, onwards, against the flow, says the Rebbe. How do I do that? I daven. I make sure I daven with kavanah as much as I can. I learn. I think in positive ways. I read things that are spiritually positive, and just we talk to the children about spiritual things. People don't do this. How many hours a week does the cheder, where you send your child, talk about ruach, about the spirituality of Yiddishkeit? Very few. How many times do they talk about believing in God? It's a taken. Of course, I'm from a Yid that I believe in God. Is that always the case? I was just listening today to someone about Shia that was big problems. People have spiritual wobbles, if you will. How do I get away from that? I take upon myself a Kabbalah. I learn something else. And I find another sefer that talks to my neshama. I find a chava that I could talk to, who's going to give me chizik, who's going to build me up. I come to the shtibel. I listen to a shir. This is to fight this public opinion that's swarming down against us, that's flowing and drowning so many. There may be a limit to how far you can go, but at least you will not be drawn down with the flow. So the Rebbe doing. We don't know what it means winning. And yes, you might, but at least you fought. And by that, you showed the Kaviyuch, the Eibishter, and then you have what we call Asiyata Deshmaya, help from Hashem, that you go the right way, that your children will be close, and they will listen and they will see that you are not just going with the flow. You're not part of the herd. We'll pick this up next week further. Eden, be gesinnt, be careful, please follow the rules. And Piesezno Rebbe Z, Yeshivas and Refias.